Good morning, this is Faith at Faith&books, and I am sitting in a parking lot, pretty much abandoned a parking lot. It's a little before 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I'm in front of this pizzeria. Anyway, I might, I don't know when it opens, but there's a crepe place right around the corner, and they do gluten-free crepes. We used to get them all the time, and I haven't for a while, so I might go splurge and get that for breakfast. I had to get up early this morning to go take flowers to my church to put some roses in front of the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe, because this is her traditional feast day. It's actually going to be celebrated tomorrow officially, because if it lands on a Sunday, Sunday always takes precedence. So anyway, so it's bumped. And my church always has a big, I never go, but they always have a big Mexican dinner at the church, big potluck thing. I just don't like to go out on weeknights very much, and I just never get around to it. But anyway, so in my own way, I honor Our Lady of Guadalupe. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about my reading week, because I had a good reading week. I finished the Confessions by St. Augustine, and it's hard to put into words how much I appreciated this. I also finished 12 Years a Slave on my Kindle. So let me just talk briefly about each. I've been talking about the Confessions off and on for a month. I started it the second week in November, I think. Yeah, and I had read condensed versions, or one particular condensed version, or is that the word I want? Abridged version with my teens when I was homeschooling them in high school. And then my oldest son read the real thing and said, you're missing a lot. He didn't think it was a very good translation, and he didn't think it was a very good abridgment. And so I went out and I bought another translation, but I just read portions of it. I didn't read the whole thing. I would just, I'd hear a quote, or somebody would mention St. Augustine in something, and I would go and I'd look it up and I'd read a bit. But I always had trouble with him because I found him arrogant, and I found him kind of overly scrupulous. I couldn't understand why he was fixating on these particular sins. And then he had this great big sin that we would consider a much bigger sin than, say, stealing pears when you're a kid, or going to shows, which he goes on about. But although maybe in those times shows were really, pornographic and gory, like our shows often are now. His biggest problem was that he had a hard time giving up sex once he converted. He really had trouble with that, which I think he would relate so much to people nowadays, because that's, of course, a problem we have now. But the way the Confessions is structured, it's weird. It's like a memoir, but at the same time, he's writing this passionate love letter to God. And he's so full of Scripture. He knows Scripture so well that it's integrated into his words. It's in really a deep way. The first 9 books, so it's separated into 13 books, and each book has short paragraphs or short sections that are called chapters. So it's 13 books, and the first 9 are him looking back at his life. So it is a memoir in that way, but it's almost like an examination of conscience. He's looking back and seeing where he had been faithless to his love for God, and where he had sinned and what he regretted. And so he's looking where he went lost, and when he did the right thing, and he's recounting his life through that lens. So that's how the first 9 books are. And then the 10th book is this whole treatise on memory, because, of course, he's remembering his life and how he remembers things happening. And he starts talking about memory. And for him, your memory is almost your mind. It's your frame of reference. It's almost like what makes you you. So he goes on and on about memory very, very profoundly. And then that gets him into the whole idea of time, what time is, and how God can be eternal, and yet he created things that exist in time. And so he goes into a lot of very deep philosophical wondering about that. And then so that's chapter 11, and then the last couple of chapters he's been analyzing the first few lines of Genesis, and then at the very end, he sort of like the second half of the last chapter, he sort of recaps everything that he's pondered about. And he's very, if you know a little bit about rhetoric, and I only know a little bit, and that's what he was. He was a rhetorician. Am I saying that right? Which was something that they really needed back in the ancient world, because you needed people to be able to get up and speak and convey ideas and make persuasive arguments. I mean, we need it now too, but they didn't have marketing back then. So, and it was how everything got done. It didn't get done so much through papers. So that was what he taught. And in rhetoric, there's this idea of amplifying an idea. So you take an idea and you can either condense it or summarize it, and you try to summarize it keeping just the salient main points, and getting rid of the stuff that's extraneous, and that's a skill to learn. But then there's also the skill of amplifying, where you go through something and you just tease out every possible layer of meaning. And that's what he does. He's really amplifies his thought. So he'll have this thought, and then he'll just go through and he'll just analyze it layer after layer after layer. And that part can be really hard to read because you're just spinning. I just felt like I get dizzy. Like my brain hurts. And so it makes you have to slow down. You have to really slow down and read carefully. Which is good. I think that's a really good exercise, because I think in this day and age we don't think deeply and we don't analyze things like that in that very disciplined way, and we go too fast and we make too many assumptions. And I think it's a really good exercise to slow down and really contemplate things and really think about it in very deep detail. So it was good, but it's good in the way that like exercise is good for you. It's not something that maybe you really feel that motivated, or it can be, you have to get over, for me, I have to get over a hump. But I really, I really enjoyed reading it this time because I feel like I got Augustine. I realized that it was this love letter. It's really about love. And it's so profound. He had so many brilliant things. So it got me excited about reading City of God for 2022. So I really appreciate it. And one thing that was really lovely about this was reading it with Christina of Knitting Books, etc., because she really had some very wise comments. And it really made the experience that much richer to be able to talk to her about things. So this is a very good book. I really think that this translation also helped me connect more with the text. This is the Ignatius Press, and it's translated by Maria Bolding, OSB. So she was a nun, and I think or a sister, and I think it was translated maybe back in the 1960s. Does it say? Where is it? No, it's saying here 1997. 1997. Okay, I thought it was older. So it's 1997. Okay. And it was published by the Augustinian Heritage Institute of Villanova, Pennsylvania. And then was republished by Ignatius Press 2012. So anyway, really good. And I love the feel of the book too, actually. It's this nice floppy, and the print is nice and big. It's a good edition. I highly recommend reading it. And then I also read on my Kindle, I read 12 Years a Slave, which was just something that I happened to have on my Kindle because it was really inexpensive. I do this Book Gorilla. It's something that I subscribed to a long time ago, and I've started to use it because you get deeply discounted Kindle reads. And so I think maybe this was free, or maybe it was like really, really inexpensive. Like, you can get things like for 49 cents or something. Anyway, it did have, when you get those really, really cheap Kindle transcriptions, they can have some typos in them. Sometimes they're really bad. Sometimes it's just occasional. This had an occasional one. Like instead of the word for, F-O-R, it was F-U-R, stuff like that. But just, it wasn't enough to mar the reading experience. But 12 Years a Slave was written by a guy named Solomon Northup, not Northrop, Northup. And he was a free black man in the first half of the 1800s. And he, in upstate New York, and he gets kidnapped and sold into slavery in Louisiana. And he spends 12 years as a slave. And he finally gets out after 12 years. And so it's him recalling what happened to him. So it's written even like, somehow it's connected to Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a book that I read maybe a dozen years ago. And apparently he's referenced in it, or he's like one of the characters that's mentioned or something. There's some sort of connection with that book. And this was published, I guess, and it was part of the movement that, right before the Civil War maybe. Because he gets out in 1853, and he's writing this, and you can tell it's pretty fresh in his memory. So he's... So maybe he got involved with the abolitionists and stuff like that. I don't know. But anyway, it's a very interesting story. It's a very interesting perspective. He was just treated brutally, and the condition of the slaves were brutal. But at the same time, he acknowledged when people were kind. He also thinks that the system was just so bad that it corrupted you no matter what. You can't grow up in an area that just has such an evil system and not be affected by it, not make it brutalize you somehow, or twist you, or warp you somehow. So it was really interesting. It was a quick read. I don't think it's a long book. I mean, I read it on Kindle, so hard to tell. But I think it's probably a pretty slender book. Easy to read. Very, very interesting. It really was quite interesting. So I'm glad that I read it, and I really want to see the movie now. So those were my two books that I read this week, or that I finished this week. And then I'm still working on Phineas Finn. I'm listening to that on audio, and up to chapter 57, something like that. So that's a long one. It's got a lot of chapters, so it's going to take me a little longer to get through. And I just started reading this last night. This is my book for the Humorous Book of the Month Club. So I'm a little bit behind. Other people have already finished, but I'm reading that. And I hope to get through this in a couple of days. And then my next reading plan is this one. This is The Gilded Girl, and it's by Alyssa Coleman. And I know her. She lives in my area, and she is my co-administrator for our local Buy Nothing group. And I have never met her, though, even though she lives in my area. And we work together. But it's, the Buy Nothing thing is through Facebook. So it's all online. I'd love to meet her sometime, though. But she wrote this book. And it just won some kind of award, too. Because I follow her on Facebook now, and she mentioned that I can't remember the name of the award. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this. So when I'm done with Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, this is going to be my next book. And I also started another Kindle read. A book that I just happened to have downloaded before on my Kindle that I'd never gotten to, and it is a biography of John James Audubon. So I knew very little about him. So it's interesting. I don't know. I just started it. I've just read the first couple of chapters. The author's style is kind of... it's like he's like a lighter David McCullough, maybe. So I don't know. It feels a little bit too set up in a way. I don't know how to explain it, but anyway. But that's my initial impression. I'm very interested in the subject matter, and he's a good writer, whoever the author is. I don't remember who it is. But it is interesting. So yeah, so for this week, reading about John James Audubon, reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then starting The Gilded Girl. And what else am I doing? I think that might be it. I feel like I'm missing something. Anyway, I've already, oh my gosh, 15 minutes. That's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and see if this shop is open so I can go get a gluten-free crepe for breakfast. All right, talk to you later. Bye.